The digital transition. The Digital Transition, brought to you by Fulton Trotter Digital, a podcast series created to assist those tasked with implementing digital strategies, where we will share our knowledge and experiences to support you in your transition. Welcome to the Digital Transition, podcast number 8. I'm your host, Nathan Hildebrandt, and today I'm chatting with Rob Roef, aka the BIM Captain. Today, Rob and I will be discussing why OpenBIM works. We'll cover why OpenBIM processes are so important and the benefits for clients to request OpenBIM deliverables as part of their digital deliverable strategy. Thanks for being with us today, Rob.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
So firstly, Rob, for those that are not aware of who you are, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, I'm Rob Roef, as you pronounce it, but it's difficult. I know that. I'm 50 years of age now, and I've been involved in CAD, computer-aided design, since the early 90s. I'm educated civil engineer, and nowadays I run my own independent consultancy company, which is called BIM Captain. I've had various roles in the past, the crossing of operations, commercial organizations. So I was a commercial director for a software company a couple of years. And recently, I've been involved in Graphisoft, who was one of my biggest clients in the past 1.5 years as their OpenBIM program manager. And nowadays, I'm working as a business developer at TNO. TNO is the Dutch research organization where they develop all kinds of new BIM tools like BIM bots and voxelization of BIM. Further, I'm involved in buildingSMART, one of the founders of the airport room, now co-leader of the building room, and I was as chair of buildingSMART Benelux. So I'm involved in BIM quite heavily.
It seems quite an extensive list there, Rob, and I guess what we're talking about right now is the kind of focus that you've had within your career over the last couple of years with regards to OpenBIM. And I think what would be valuable would be in the future, either in a second series that we do next year, to actually come back and have another chat to you about some of the tools that the team that you're working with are currently creating, because as people begin on their journey, they need to understand the first steps, which is what we're talking about today. But then looking forward to next year, then we could potentially talk about some additional tools or processes that they could adopt that are kind of smart technologies that you're working with. Would that be right?
Yeah, that's fantastic. I'm talking about machine learning and all those stuff. But the nice thing, it's all based on OpenBIM standards. So we can discuss today the OpenBIM standards, and then later on we can discuss the next steps that people can make. But
the people throughout the last 7 episodes would have heard me talk about BIM, and they would have heard me talk about OpenBIM. But the biggest problem we have within industry for people that are beginning their journey is that there are a lot of acronyms and terminology that can be quite confusing. So could you give a short description about what OpenBIM is?
Yes, of course. I will try to. I always try to explore wherever I am how OpenBIM really differentiates from BIM. And to be honest, it doesn't. So we are speaking about OpenBIM as a universal approach to the collaborative design, realization, and operation of buildings based on open standards and workflows. Well, I'm reading that out. That's the official definition of OpenBIM coming from buildingSMART. A lot of people think different about OpenBIM. So people say it's software independency, it's long time archiving of BIM data. The OpenBIM standards are often referred to buildingSMART again, but most of all, OpenBIM is a mindset. So we need to be open. You need to be open to collaborate with others, not depending on the software or the systems that they are using. People are being chosen for their profession, for how good they are at that profession, and not because of what tools they are using. To conclude, OpenBIM is a mindset.
I like a mindset. It's very thoughtful at this time of the evening for me. You mentioned that OpenBIM was developed, or it's a terminology kind of held by BuildingSMART. Can you give a bit of an explanation behind, I guess, who BuildingSMART are for people that aren't aware, and what their role
Yeah,
is within an industry? And I guess the other key thing is noting that this is an international organisation.
it is an international organization, but it's supported locally. So buildingSMART was founded many years ago. Different stakeholders were involved, software companies, architects, and some other industry stakeholders to have a platform, a universal platform to develop and support and maintain open standards. But I said it's supported locally, and I think BuildingSMART has over 25 chapters. Chapters are local representatives of BuildingSMART, sometimes going over national borders where people speak the same language to support the implementation of open standards in the in the various countries, supporting local standards. It's a non-for-profit organization, so a lot of volunteers are involved. We have twice a year an international standard summit. Last month we had one in Düsseldorf in Germany, and there were over 1,000 people involved now already. So that's a couple of years ago it was only 100, 150. So we are growing really fast. There's a lot of user commitment, and nowadays what BuildingSMART is doing is taking care of the certification of software, certification of individuals, and they develop a lot of standards, 5 standards at this moment, and some of them are even ISO certificated. One of those standards is IFC. People have heard about it, and from a BuildingSMART point of view, IFC stands for International Friendship Club. So it's really it's really a nice organization to be involved with.
So their role is essentially to roll out standards across the globe, and then the local chapters would essentially be representing their industries within their own countries to provide feedback loops essentially to developing standards that actually meet the requirements not only of their own individual countries but the whole globe.
Yeah, it's the whole globe. So
Yeah.
it's to provide open BIM standards to the global BIM globe and bring measurable benefits to the users. And I think that's really important. And it's a global led company, and it's a trusted resource and a partner for many governments and industry leaders. It's quite an interesting organization. Diffuse if you are looking from the outside, but very sufficient run from the inside.
I guess the key thing about BuildingSMART's role, and when new users or new people go onto their website and you start digging into the type of outputs that are produced by BuildingSMART International, people are struck with a whole new series of acronyms. And I know this is a lot of fun. This is the best bit of fun of this whole discussion for people. But the key thing about this is that we want to try and go through each one of these one by one so we can kind of remove some of the acronym confusion that there is. Because this is where, it becomes quite frustrating for people as well. For the listeners out there, I'm going to hit you with the first one. What is an IDM, and which ISO standard could it be covered in?
It's fantastic, all those acronyms. And sometimes I have to look them up because, of course, I know some by heart. But, okay, IDM stands for Information Delivery Manual. IDM, an Information Delivery Manual, it's part of the ISO 29481-1 and -2. But an IDM looks at the individual processes and maps them to understand what should be flowing and when. I usually say it describes in a BIM process, from a BIM process point of view, who needs what, where, why, and how. Okay.
Essentially, it's a standard which describes the process of which information transfers and how
Runs.
that all
Yeah.
happens, and the
Yeah. So
and what information is required.
yes. So an IDM includes a transaction map, a process map, but as well the exchange requirements. All the standards that are supporting the process are described in an information delivery manual. What is really nice is there is a basic IDM developed uh, in the Netherlands.
Yep.
And that basic IDM, it's a two-pager. It's really, really easy to understand, which is now translated, I think, into 15 languages already. And it's supporting 70% of the BIM globe at this moment. So if people Google for basic IDM, they should find some very useful information.
We briefly touched on the International Friend Club, which for those
Mhm.
that are listening right now, the acronym IFC doesn't actually stand for that in a formal manner. Can we talk about what IFC actually stands for and also its ISO standard?
Well, IFC, that acronym, I don't know who came up with it, but people should forget it. It's industry foundation class, but please don't try to remember that. Actually, it's an ISO standard. It's 16739. And I always call it the basic operating system that transport the information and the data. So that is the IFC is the most important standard developed within buildingSMART and officially an ISO standard. It's like I said, it's basically the carrier, the information carrier of the data. It's an express scheme for some people that are a little bit more technical, and there's a lot of development in IFC at this moment. Currently, there is an IFC version 4. The industry is still working with IFC 2X3. That was the previous version, and that has to do with the certification process of the software, which is a difficult process. A lot of software, of course, the software I've been working with for the past years is already able to exchange and interpret IFC4, but officially that software is not certified yet. So people are always exchanging information in the BIM process, in an open BIM process, through and via IFC.
So essentially, an IFC is just the translator between all the native software formats in an internationally recognized file format or a file schema from which the software vendors need to map their native terminology into a
Yes,
international language, which is the IFC language, and then
yeah, IFC.
the receiving language, the receiver takes that file and then is able to then remap and translate it back into its receiving native software. So that's essentially enabling all those tools to be used by different people, which I'm sure you'll enjoy when we delve into a bit more detail shortly about that. Now we're going to hit another couple of acronyms, but the first one, BCF file. Now the key thing for people to note is BCF is not an ISO standard.
BCF is the BIM collaboration format. And IFC, we just mentioned, is not a native file format. So you were correct. People are accepting and inter-exchanging IFC. And I always call BIM a demand-driven process. So you need to know what the other needs to do their job better. And to exchange issues in the BIM process, we developed BCF. And BCF is for issue tracking of IFC. So it was originally developed by Tekla and Solibri and later adopted as a standard by buildingSMART. BCF contains snapshots of IFC data, and IFC data contains both graphical and non-graphical information, and it's just to exchange issues. I just mentioned Solibri. I think a lot of people heard about that software. In Solibri, you can do a class check or a rule-based model check. You need to communicate that, and instead of sending over a complete IFC, you're only sending over issues.
And you're only sending the information that's relevant, which is the most important thing, without sending essentially additional digital information that's of actually no purpose to communicate a problem. So I think that's probably the key thing to note about BCF.
Yes, like I said, it's a demand-driven process, and you need to exchange only relevant information.
But we're up to the next one, which is IFD. And also, can you talk about what ISO standard it is?
Yeah. IFD stands for International Framework for Dictionaries. And it's sometimes confused with the BuildingSMART data dictionary.
Yep.
It's an ISO standard. It's an official ISO standard. It's the 12006-3. Actually, it's a data dictionary. And like I said, the IFC is the carrier of the information. And not all the information needs to be exchanged in the carrier. So it has references to data dictionaries. And, well, the IFD is the most common and the most used standard when it comes to data dictionaries in the BIM world. It's linking existing databases with construction information. It's not so.
It's not an exciting
difficult.
standard,
No.
but it's one of the things that gets covered typically within softwares, and
absolutely,
and it's mainly something for focus of people that are software developers or content creators, essentially.
Yeah, like well, we're not mentioning a lot where I'm working now, but at TNO they are exploring these kind of developments. They are exchanging info or linking these kind of databases, dictionaries from the built environment, so our BIM world, into the GIS world. Data standardization is very, very important in the end. So it's not about software, it's about data. And therefore this IFD will be very important in the coming years.
Now we're up to our final acronym for the evening. Now today is what is an MVD? And we also note this isn't covered in an ISO standard.
An MVD is basically a subset of IFC. Like you just mentioned, and I said before as well, you need to exchange relevant information. An IFC, a complete model, can contain too much information. So you can create subsets, and those subsets are called model view definitions. And there are a lot of interpretations there. You can create your own. We both can create our own model view definition. And there are some buildingSMART official model view definitions as well, implemented in software. So it's a subset of an IFC.
And typically what most people would be using with an IFC 2x3 would be Coordination View 2.0. But there's also a series of other model view definitions that have been created for the purposes of costing from quantity surveyors. And there's also another model view definition for COBE, which we won't go into too much detail. Moving on to some of the reasons why OpenBIM works. The joys of this is, and I remember you bailing me up in Budapest at one of the functions at Graphisoft's KCC event last year, and you asked me without a bit of warning, and this was after having a few sherbets, and you kind of shoved your phone in my face and said, Nathan, what does OpenBIM mean to me? And my response or analogy was as follows. So because it gives everyone in the supply chain a chance to choose their tool of choice to deliver what's required for a client. Now, if we're all stuck using the same tool, we wouldn't be able to deliver our best output. Now, when you are building a building, you don't just use a screwdriver. You use a whole series of tools to physically build it. Now, why shouldn't that be any different with BIM software? Because all of our roles are essentially unique, and we're not all carpenters. We might be an electrician or we might be a plumber, and we have different tools to do that. In a similar way, Rob, and you might not, it's early in the morning over there now, and you probably haven't had any sherbets, but I'm going to put you on the spot right now and ask you what OpenBIM means to you.
Okay, well, it's almost a lifestyle for me, OpenBIM. It's. I hope that my crusade, as I call it, for OpenBIM, will result in better understanding for each stakeholder. So I'm not biased. I'm a supporter of all vendors. Like I said, it's a mindset. So I liked your approach about the screwdriver. I'm using it all the time. So when I'm doing a presentation about OpenBIM, I always use that little snapshot I made from you. I would like the global industry, the global construction industry, to really work together, and that there are many tools available, that people have a free choice, and that it's not mandated. That's what OpenBIM really means to me at this moment.
Let's go in a bit more detail now about, I guess, the real true benefits of OpenBIM. Many built assets have lifespans of over 50 years. There are risks associated with proprietary file types. Andrew Curthoys from the Queensland Government actually briefly touched on this in episode 2 of this series, where he discussed the issues that he had with 3.25-inch floppy disks and some files that he had that were not updated in line with his specific software at the time. You'd be old enough to remember 3.25-inch floppies, wouldn't you, Rob? I am as well. But the thing is, does anyone, 3.25-inch floppies were around when I was in primary school, right? You imagine trying to actually find a computer that had a 3.25-inch floppy drive right now to actually take those files. Now,
actually, wasn't it 3.5 and 5.25?
No, it was 5 3/4-inch.
Oh, that was it. Oh, yeah.
It was 5 3/4 and 3.25.
Yeah,
it could have been 3.5. I might be wrong there as well.
Yeah. Well, okay.
But then another analogy that I kind of like to use with this is with proprietary files, formats, is actually can be drawn to a lot of things that most people have experience with audio and visual content over the last 50 years. Now, the formats have changed significantly, right? No one uses VHS tapes anymore, cassette tapes or floppy disks even, right? If you align this analogy with kind of file formats and saving proprietary stuff from a built asset perspective of storage of information, what do you think that the benefits would be for a client in specifying OpenBIM deliverables over a proprietary file type?
I'm not a fortune teller, of course, but I think that when I look back, I still have my PC30, a Commodore 30 meg hard disk drive, and where I developed my tools for my parents' company. And I programmed there in DBase 3 and Clipper and exactly. And I cannot read those files anymore, but I can still read those JPEGs from those times. And JPEG is an open format. We had TIFF in those days as well for photos, but I cannot read those anymore. So I think that in the end, we are benefiting as an industry from open standards, because those open standards are backwards compatible. You can still open them no matter how they evolved. So, like I just said, a lot of people are thinking about connecting data, linking data. We see that the IFC schemes are developing into IFC OWL. So the more object-oriented libraries, but it's still backwards compatible. And I think backwards compatibility is the key issue here. Of course, we have proprietary software that is backwards compatible as well, but then you still need that type of software. And so Minucci from Italy, he said to me, I don't want to be handcuffed or locked in by a vendor. I want to invest in open standards so I can use the tool that I want at that time.
Now, I guess the key thing is before people start going nuts on social media, because I know a number of technical-minded people within industry do listen to the podcast. I have to acknowledge that, yes, there are some clients that may see benefit in maintaining their digital assets in a proprietary format. And this approach, I think, in my opinion, can lead to other issues, which needs to be considered. Now, Rob, can you comment on this and your thoughts? Now, obviously, he's talked about the gentleman from Italy that talks about not wanting to be wedded to one software, but you're able to comment on, from your opinion, the issues that actually can be faced by clients that actually want to maintain their assets in a proprietary format?
Yeah. Well, last week I was in Barcelona and I was hit by a guy from a very, very big organization that was standardized on proprietary data. And they thought it was the best idea. It is an international organization, but now they want he really explained to me that he wants to move out of that area and he wants to have it in an open format because it's going to be too expensive to maintain that system. And I think that software vendors were benefiting from that lock-in, but they are now forced to go open. So it will be just a matter of time before we will be able to exchange information through different ecosystems. As I remember, a couple of months ago, there was an initiative started from different common data environment vendors to have a common data exchange format based on open standards, maybe IFC, maybe something else. So at this moment, I understand that an owner or a client wants to have both. They want to have the proprietary information and they want to have the open standard. In the end, they will benefit more from the open standard.
From my perspective, I see it as actually more to do with the cost of maintaining software subscriptions and constantly updating models to current releases. Now, that's the first thing that I see as a problem because of the fact that, as an asset owner, the expectations of having to maintain an asset and having to have software to maintain your asset constantly rather than having someone else do that for you can be costly. And then secondly, the other issue that I kind of look at is it actually limits your market competition in terms of, for example, within my profession, the architectural profession, if you only want a file in one format, then it actually limits the market that you can actually receive services from. Now, in the end, you don't want to be dictating the vehicle that drives your package to you as a client. You want to specify what the package looks like, how much the package would cost, and at what and when you want it delivered. But you shouldn't really need to get into the details of how that person or the brand or the color of the vehicle that drives it there.
No, but you have to be aware that in some areas in the world, people are not really they are not so transparent. Let me say it like that. So the industry is not so transparent, and when you mandate proprietary standards, then you can hide behind that curtain of not being transparent. And some clients, they just want to build and sell the property. So why do they need information or data standards that they can still use for the common or for the next 50 years? So there's a lot of arguments going on, and therefore we need to have podcasts like this to explain, and you did it just very well, that there are other options.
This could be an interesting two-way conversation, this one, rather than a strict question. And there's people in industry that criticize IFC for not working in practice. You would have been around in Slovenia last year when you might have seen me talk about my beliefs about the critique of IFC. And you briefly touched on before about how there are a number of people within industry currently working to further develop IFC, and we're moving through the various releases to pick up certain things. Now, IFC is kind of a developing schema, and as a schema, it's only going to be able to develop further through essentially the same process of feedback loop that occurs using ISO 9001 in terms of a quality assurance system. Now, one of the other analogies that I used a couple of months ago when I presented over in Slovenia was the concept that even the English dictionary, so the Webster English Dictionary, last year added 1,500 new words to it.
Yeah.
Now, this is a language that's been around for over 1,000 years. Now, IFC is essentially like a instantaneous translator. It performs the role of communicating between two native languages of authoring softwares or receiving softwares. And it's only going to improve the more people use it and the more that people provide feedback. Now, that's kind of my view on how IFC as a schema will improve. Would you have a different view on that, Rob? Or be able to value add to what I just said?
No, that's absolutely right. And the criticism that IFC is not working is not because of the standard is not working, but it's because of the interpretation of the people that are working with it, or maybe some parts of the industry want you to believe that it's not working. I spent a lot of time on educating people and explaining how they make it work. It's not easy to make things work. It's like I said, it's a demand-driven process. So you need to be aware of what the other need to do their job better. Only if you understand what the other needs, you can supply them with the correct information. So, like you said, the standard is growing, the standard is improving, the scheme itself is improving, and the knowledge of how it can be implemented in an organization is improving. So we need all those different variables. It's not that the standard is the best. I think you just mentioned VAS, but I think Betamax was in Europe a better standard, but VHS1, and that was because of the implementation of the VHS and the market approach. So we need to work on that. We need to educate the market as well as develop the standard.
In a similar approach, people also criticize COBE, or as I touched on in the last session with Rob Jackson, it's Construction Operation Building Information Exchange. So this is one of the model view definitions of IFC for facilities management purposes. Now, from your perspective, Rob, what's one of the key benefits, I guess, of actually taking COBE for as a FM handover versus a bespoke solution?
Well, to be honest, it's the only FM handover standard that I am aware of. I don't know if there are many more, but it's one that is, and it's proven technology. It's coming from the US. It was implemented in the UK. A lot of people are looking at it, and from an asset manager point of view, it's very, very interesting. And like I said, it's the only one I know.
I guess the key thing to take away from that is that asking for a standard deliverable or a deliverable that meets a standard would be easier for industry or the supply chain to respond to, rather than expecting a bespoke solution that no one else has worked with before. So they have to actually discover their own way in which they can come up with a way to deliver you that outcome.
Correct. I think that's a very good approach here.
Rob, thanks very much for taking the time to sit down with me today and discussing the benefits of OpenBIM. Now, I think you've probably covered this a couple of times, but I just want to keep this in the right order in terms of the way I want to finish out the interview. But I've also asked this question for all the other guests that I've had on, and what does BIM mean to you?
Yeah. Well, I cannot imagine a construction world without BIM. So the demand-driven process to let everybody do their job better. And maybe in a couple of years, the term BIM will disappear. And then we succeeded in educating the market in working in a new way.
Rob, thanks once again for your time. For more information on OpenBIM, please head to our website and find the links to read more about the topic that we discussed today. I look forward to sharing our next podcast in a fortnight's time. Until then, good luck with your digital transition. If you would like assistance with your digital transition, please contact us at digital@fultontrotter.com.au. For more information, or if you'd like to continue the discussion in the comments section, head over to our website, thedigitaltransition.com. Remember to subscribe so you don't miss out on our future podcasts. We would also appreciate it if you provide us with a rating and take the time to provide us with a review. Thanks for listening to The Digital Transition, brought to you by Fulton Trotter Digital. The Digital Transition.